So I'm going to try to keep this short so we can get to the panel discussion. A longer version of this talk is on the EBM Tools Network. And I want to tell you what the Marine Ecosystem Services Partnership is and is not. I never call it a database. And I don't because I think of what Jennifer and what Sander and what ESPD are doing are real databases. When I started doing environmental evaluation in the 1990s, there weren't very many people doing these valuation studies, and there were many fewer people who cared about them. Most of the people that did were people interested in damages. Since then, we've moved to thousands of people doing this research, many thousands of people wanting information about ecosystem services, and funders finally becoming genuinely interested in funding this kind of work. So first and foremost, the Marine Ecosystem Services Partnership started off as a way of trying to link these groups. We have lots of people who are interested in using ecosystem service values now but have no idea where to find these. I'm sure many of you have gone to small island developing states and been told you're the first person ever to do a valuation study here, and then 2 months into your consultancy, you find a yellow dissertation with valuation studies, and in another study over here that was done by some international donor. There are lots and lots of studies out there that aren't easy to find and that aren't in the journals. And then the ones that are in journals are often in journals that are only available to you if you're at a university that's paid the $2,000 annual subscription fee. So, part of this is really helping people navigate what's out there and trying to bring more of this information in. Part of this is trying to help researchers understand where the research needs are. We looked at, I think Sander said, why do we see so many coral reef valuation studies? Well, I was someone who started off in tropical forestry, moved to coral reef valuation studies because I like to scuba dive and surf. So, there's a lot to that. So a lot of this is trying to figure out where the need is and how we can link our interests with needs. And then the third is to bring the funders together. But the real genesis of what we did started with discussions we had about 3 or 4 years ago with Conservation International and NOAA. And I gathered this is about the same time we started thinking about the Ecosystem Services Partnership. We have lots of ecosystem service partnerships now of various names. They all end in ESP. Good for you for getting the ESP as your own. And we had basically very similar sorts of thoughts. I started working initially with NOAA's Coral Reef Valuation database and also the ConsVal Map database that Jose Maria has been working with. And the idea was to create a home for homeless databases. Okay? What we have seen over time is these databases come and go, and one of the reasons they go is because they can be very expensive to run. For all the reasons you talked about, and one reason that you didn't, but was implied by the editorial board, is if you're going to have a database, if you're going to have numbers that people can use for analysis, you have to have some measure of quality. And determining what's good enough and what isn't is almost as difficult as discerning all of these different valuations and criteria and all the variables that Sander was talking about. So we wanted to create a home that wasn't too expensive. I appreciate y'all saying it's sophisticated. It really isn't sophisticated, although maybe it's elegant in its simplicity, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But it's been designed so it can be managed on an annual basis for less than $2,000 a year, working with graduate students. Now, graduate students come and go. I only get them for a year, so I couldn't spend 6 months teaching them about all of the variables that you do, and then lose them 4 months later when they graduate. So we've tried to keep it pretty simple, and I'll talk about that simplicity. But we didn't want to just be this site to go to these old databases. We also wanted to be able to connect all the new databases that are out there. So there's the ESPD, there's the GECO Serve in North America, which is a Gulf of Mexico Ecosystem Services Values database. There's the National Ocean Economics Program Non-Market Valuation database that I put together some years ago. It's now run by Jason Scorse. So there are numbers of databases here, and one thing that they all have in common is they're all different. Right? Each one has different sets of variables and different ways of talking about value. So you have dollars per hectare, gross revenues, net revenues, consumer surplus per person per day. There's all sorts of different kinds of values. And as Jennifer was describing, and as Sander and Dolph know very well, it takes a lot of time to put them all in a sort of consistent database. And we don't have that kind of time and money in this rather low-cost operation. So what we tried to do is have a consistent set of basic data about the bibliographic information, the geographic information, ecosystem types, and just very basic ecosystem services. We started early on working with Sunder and Dolphin, looked at the 74 sub-services, and we thought, that's great, we can't do it. And so